Now, I want to take the time to let you guys know that I originally did this video about a month ago, but I just didn't release it yet because I didn't know if some of the footage would get blocked. So I just kind of sat on it for a minute. But anyway, this is the part 2 of this UFC video. If you haven't seen part 1, which I'm trying to go ahead and release all together at the same time, please go back, revert to part 1 before you watch part 2 so you can get caught up. Okay? Now let's go ahead and get into it. Now I'm going to start with this picture I'm showing you guys right now. You guys looking at this picture, right? Well, you know, about a little over 10 years ago, this is virtually how the UFC looked. You feel me? This is pretty much identical to how it looked. You know, only picture I don't have in there is Royce Gracie's picture. All right? Now let me show you guys a picture of how things have slightly changed just a bit. Okay? Now you're looking at some black fighters, and you're looking at a whole bunch of black fighters that have emerged in this sport that weren't there, like I said, about 10, 12 years ago. So could this have anything to do with the racism in the sport today? I mean, if you think about it, all those pictures I showed you before, none of those fighters were hated. None of those fighters were rarely ever booed. They were all loved, you know. So, you know, we, like I said, we know what time it is. Do you guys remember the days back in the day when you were younger and you would, you know, play video games with your homies, you know, and if you were anything like me, sometimes, you know, the situation got real competitive to where it was like damn near heated, right? Where, you know, I could say, you know, with my personal experiences that I have, I remember, you know, I would play with one of my homies, my homie Lewis, you know, and he was the only person who can get at me, you know, in Street Fighter. He used to whoop my ass in Street Fighter, right? No matter how hard I tried, right? And every time I would lose, I would get more and more angry. And he would just smile. He would have that giggle on his face. He wasn't really jumping up and na in my face, but it was just the fact that I was losing and he was winning and he was happy about it. That's what upset me. And this is what upsets this category of white racist UFC fans as well. You have to watch the person who you are hoping to God loses. You have to watch him win and celebrate. And that is what enrages these type of fans. It's so funny whenever you see a lot of the white fighters, a lot of the non-black fighters, they do all kind of celebrations when they dance, when they win. You know, you got BJ Penn, you know, he licking his opponent's blood, you know, all in the camera, you know, but people love him. You know, it's like when BJ Penn does his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. Everybody wants to hear his thoughts about the fight, right? What does this motherfucker do? He fucking says, go to bjpenn.com and walks off. And the crowd goes crazy. They go nuts, right? Could you guys imagine what would happen if John Jones did this shit? Could you imagine, guys? Seriously. If Joe Rogan was interviewing John Jones and he just looked at Joe Rogan and said, you want to hear what I got to say? You take your ass to johnjones.com and walked off. Man, they would have tried to fucking ban his ass from UFC. There would have been a petition to get rid of this black bastard. You feel me? Just think about it, guys. Think about it. Imagine if John Jones were to do some of the things that some of these non-black fighters have done. Michael Bisping, this fool, after he beats a guy that he had a riff with, you know, usually this is the time when you hug and you make up, you know what I'm saying? Because you guys have already fought. So the beef is gone, you know? When you fight each other, that's when you get more respect. You can hate the shit out of somebody, but when you fight them, you respect them. You feel me? Michael Bisping, after he wins the fight, he walks over and spits on his opponent's trainer or coach. You feel me? And this man is still even in the UFC? Could you imagine if John Jones, Anderson Silva, Rashad Evans did some shit like that? Come on, y'all. You already know what time it is. Motherfucker would have probably got assassinated. You guys know what time it is. You know what time John Jones, John Jones, he didn't take this fight. And you guys know he getting death threats, right? You know he getting racist ass tweets just because he didn't take a fight, right? But yet nobody is talking about the fact that Machida turned down a fight with John Jones. Come on, guys, we know what time it is. We know what time it is, right? You feel me? Because, like I said, Anderson Silva is Brazilian. Royce Gracie is Brazilian. Now, when Anderson Silva was dominant, you know what I'm saying? Like I told you, just like everybody else, when Anderson Silva first beat Rich Franklin, that's when he started to get booed. Just like I told you guys about Jack Johnson. You know, people didn't really boo Anderson Silva before because they had this feeling, this pride. They had this white pride, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, guys. They had this pride. Nobody's going to beat us. We're the dominant ones. We got Chuck Liddell. We got Randy Couture. You know, Anderson Silva can't beat Chuck Liddell. Anderson Silva can't beat Rich Franklin. He can't beat one of our guys. Soon as he beats him, all of a sudden, nothing but boos. Nothing but boos, right? And then all of a sudden, they wait for Anderson Silva to have one, not perfect, performance, the Damian Maia fight, which still was a good fight. The first 3 rounds was good. The last 2 rounds, you got to take the title from the champion. You can't blame that shit on Anderson Silva, because Damian Maia is afraid to get countered. He's afraid to try to take him down. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, this is when they decide to say, oh, I don't like Anderson Silva because he's boring. But just like John Jones, you guys didn't like him before that fight. You guys were booing him before that. But now you say, oh, that's the reason. You know what? I just figured out this is the reason why I don't like Anderson Silva. I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but yeah, that's the reason, right? So that's the reason, right? So the funny thing about this situation is when Royce Gracie, as boring as a fighter as Royce Gracie was, when Royce Gracie was sitting on the ground for 5 minutes straight with his back on the ground fighting against Ken Shamrock. You know what I'm saying? And of course there were reams of boos, right? Because it was boring. I remember watching that shit. It was the most boring shit I had ever seen. Because see, unlike Anderson Silva, Royce Gracie, he had no stand-up. All he had was jiu-jitsu. He could do nothing standing up, right? So that fight they laid on the ground for the whole fucking round. No action at all. Reams of boos. But why is it the very next fight that Royce Gracie had, all of a sudden, all is forgiven? All is forgiven. He's still the greatest. Everybody still loves him. Blah, blah this and blah, blah that. Meanwhile, Anderson Silva has one lesser, type of performance 6 fights ago, and you got people telling me, oh, that's the reason why I hate Anderson Silva. Because you remember that fight 6 fights ago? Get the fuck out of here, man. You know that's some ridiculous ass shit. And coincidentally, the rule where the referee stands up a fighter when there's no action on the ground, that came directly from the result of that Royce Gracie versus Shamrock dreadful fight. Okay? When I made my video, why do white fans, boo Anderson Silva? It was so funny because you had some fans who were going against, of course, what I was saying. They would send me a message every once in a blue moon saying, oh, the reason why people boo him is because he put that mask on when he fought against, Vitor Belfort. Yeah, that's why they hated him. But you dumbasses don't want to accept the fact that they was booing Anderson Silva soon as they announced his name for the weigh-in. Before he put the mask on. The mask was after the fact. You feel me? You guys can't have this conversation with me because I will completely depict anything that you say. You know what I'm saying? There are going to be some people who are not going to like this video, and they're not going to like it because they know it makes complete fucking sense. See, the UFC was never supposed to be a sport where black people would play a major role in. To a lot of white fans, and like I said, once again, I'm not talking about all of the white fans, but to a lot of white UFC fans, This was their way of basically saying, okay, the Mexicans and the blacks, they took over boxing, but guess what? Now we got our own sport. And guess what? Our sport is better than yours. We're tougher, we're meaner, etc., blah, 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 right? Matter of fact, we notice is the case because I remember there was a time when Hoist Gracie was fighting, and this white guy was holding up a sign that basically said Hoist Gracie versus Mike Tyson. We all know what that obviously suggests. That's saying, yeah, you bad at you guys think you're so bad because you guys got Mike Tyson and all these black fighters and stuff like that. But guess what? Now we got Hoist Gracie. And even though Hoist Gracie, he wasn't white, but according to what I've been hearing on YouTube, a lot of white people, they feel as long as you're closer to looking white than you are to looking black, they are going to basically, put you on their team. You qualify to be on the white team, right? And the funny thing is, it's not even the racism that bothers me the most. What bothers me the most about this whole situation is people trying to act like racism doesn't even exist in this situation. That's the part that bothers me the most. Because, see, you got to understand something. I don't condemn anyone. If you want to root for your own race, I don't condemn anyone for that. Okay? If you want to do that, that's fine. But don't sit around and be a hypocrite, and say it's okay for this guy to act like this, act like an asshole, act arrogant, act cocky, act however you want to act. It's okay for this person to do it. Okay, but if this person does it, oh no, that's not acceptable. And oh yeah, it has nothing to do with race, by the way. You feel me? That's the part that bothers me the most. Just be straight, just be straight up with it. You know what I mean? Just say, yeah, man, I can't wait till we get another Chuck Liddell. Y'all got y'all Anderson Silvas and all of this. Be straight up about it. Okay? Be straight up about it. You don't have to fucking cover it up and try to talk to somebody like they're stupid. Now before I forget, let me go ahead and get into the lesser of two evils syndrome. Okay? This is further evidence of what's going on today and how we know that it has something to do with racism. You feel me? I mean, let's look at the lesser of two evils syndrome. When I say lesser of two evils, that means when you have two people in the ring, you can't stand either one, so you have to root for one. Even if you hate both of them, you're rooting for one to beat the other one, right? Let's look at Rampage, for example. Rampage was the first fighter to come into the UFC after it had already emerged and got big, after Dana White took it over, and when Chuck Liddell at the time, he could do no wrong. He was the Superman of the sport, the most loved man. UFC fans, they cherish and idolize this man, right? So UFC, they have Chuck Liddell dominating the sport. Rampage is the first black fighter to come in and dominate the best fighter in the sport at the time, right? Now, right away, like I said before, right away, as soon as Rampage wins the title, he is extremely booed, right? And every time you see them showing Rampage in the crowd, on other UFC events, he's just watching and the camera will pan to him and all of a sudden you'll just hear a rain of boos just because the camera's just showing him, right? So it just got worse and worse as he continued to win, right? Soon as Rampage loses to Forrest Griffin, all of a sudden he's not getting booed as bad anymore. Now, while Rampage is starting to decline, you got a new black star who's starting to emerge. His name is Rashad Evans, right? Now follow me now. Now Rashad Evans, he's climbing the ranks. For those of you who don't know, Rashad Evans, he went through The Ultimate Fighter, the reality TV show. He fought as a heavyweight when he's naturally a very small light heavyweight at 5'10", right? He won the tournament as a heavyweight, okay? Now he goes into the rankings. He's moving up the ladder. Now this is when, he's not really getting booed really at all until he fights against Tito Ortiz. Once he fights against Tito Ortiz, now he's starting to get the light boos, right? And like I said before, I've already told you, I understand Tito Ortiz, he's not white, but the way a lot of people look at it is he's closer to white than he is to black. And like I said, I'm going off of what people are arguing with me on YouTube. These are messages that have been sent to me. So back to the point I'm making, right? So Rashad Evans, he fights against Tito Ortiz. He's at a category 1 when it comes to being booed. Like I said before, my analogy of a category 1 is like a hurricane. You go from a category 1 being, the beginning stages to a category 5, which is, the worst it can get, right? So at this point, Rashad Evans, he's a category 1 when it comes to getting booed, right? Then all of a sudden he has a draw with him. Okay, you fast forward, he fights Chuck Liddell, right? Heavy underdog. Rashad Evans is a heavy underdog, and he knocks Chuck Liddell the fuck out. Now, immediately, Rashad Evans, he goes from a category 1 to about a category 3 when it comes to the boos and the hatred, right? Now, he goes and he fights for the title against who? Forrest Griffin, the man who just beat Quentin Rampage Jackson, right? So now, Rashad Evans, he knocks out Forrest Griffin. Now he's an official category 5 when it comes to the hate meter. Okay? Now he's completely getting booed, right? Getting booed tremendously. Now this is when the lesser of the two evils syndrome comes in. Because see, now they pit Rashad Evans up against Rampage, right? Now, let me just ask you before I even go further, who do you think that they would boo in that fight? Well, if you pick Rashad Evans, you're right. Because at the time, Rashad Evans, see, the thing is, Quentin Rampage, he's already lost. And he's already lost to Forrest Griffin. So a lot of the fans who think this way, they already see Quentin Rampage as, we beat him before, but we have never beat Rashad Evans. Okay? So the person that's getting booed, the worst is Rashad Evans because he's the champion, right? He's the champion going into this fight with Quentin Rampage, all right? Now all of a sudden they love Rampage. You got people cheering Rampage and all kind of shit, right? The lesser of two evils, okay? So now while these two black fighters are fighting, there's another young black heavyweight who's emerging, he's taking baby steps while Rampage and Rashad Evans are, fighting against each other. His name is John Jones, right? John Jones. Now understand this, guys. Like I said, John Jones was never booed up until he fought against Bader. I guess it's Ryan Bader or something like that. But he fought against Bader, and this is when you started to get the light boos. He was a category 1, all right? All of a sudden, when John Jones fought for the title, that's when he jumped from a category 1 to about a category 3. Okay? You're starting to hear more boos. Now here we go again, the lesser of two evils again. Now John Jones is pitted up against who? Rashad Evans. Now you guys remember, like I just said, when Rashad was fighting against Rampage, who was the most hated? Who was booed the most? It was Rashad Evans, right? Now who's getting booed the most? Now who's getting cheers in the crowd? Now Rashad Evans is getting cheers. You feel me? And Bones Jones is getting hellaciously booed, right? Come on, guys. The lesser of two evils. Why? Once again, Rashad has already showed that he can lose. John Jones has not showed that he can lose. They're not really rooting for Rashad Evans. They're rooting against John Jones. Just like when Evans was fighting against Rampage, they weren't rooting for Rampage. They were just rooting against Rashad Evans. You feel me? So it's the same thing. If hypothetically, if John Jones were to get knocked out today and there was some new black fighter coming up, I can guarantee you, if this guy, if he's a champion, he becomes champion, I can guarantee you that if he fights against John Jones, all of a sudden John Jones will be the hero. Because it's all about stopping dominance. That's what it really comes to. Stopping dominance. Oh, we don't hate you anymore because you're not the best. You ever notice a lot of the fighters who aren't dominant, they are usually loved. You know what I'm saying? I hear, fans tell me all the time, oh, I like this, I like so and so. They'll name some black dude who got like 8 losses or some shit, or he's just on a losing streak, or he loses, then he wins, and he loses like Gallard, like Melvin Gallard. Oh, I love Melvin Gallard. Of course you like Melvin Gallard because he loses every other fight. But I can guarantee you, if he went on a 15 winning streak, you know what I'm saying, a 15 fight winning streak, and he was a champion, and all of a sudden now people calling him one of the greatest welterweights or whatever, division he fights, I can guarantee you things will be different. You feel me? So, that's what it is, man. It's the lesser of two evils. So anyway, man, I'm about to go ahead and shut this video down. But before I do, I just want to, make it known right now. I already know what type of messages and replies and responses I'm going to get from some of these exact UFC fans that I'm referring to in this video. You guys are basically going to send me messages saying there's no racism in the UFC. You're just the one that's racist and all this kind of shit like that. And I think it's the most silliest thing for people to say that. You're going to call a person racist because he's bringing up racism. It's the most silliest shit to me I've ever heard of. So if I were to call Mel Gibson a racist, would that make me a racist? If I were to say Dog the Bounty Hunter or Michael Richardson from Seinfeld, any of these people who have been proven to be racist, if I call them a racist, oh yeah, that makes me a racist, right? Oh yeah, because I brought it up when I wasn't supposed to bring it up at all, right? Right. That really makes a lot of fucking sense, doesn't it? The other message I'm gonna get is, I know I'm gonna get a lot of messages, John Jones is just an asshole, man. He's just an asshole, and we just dislike him because he's cocky and arrogant. But I already debunked that in my whole video, so I'm not even gonna try to reply to that at all. But the one thing I will say about the John Jones situation is you would have to think that I'm a damn fool to not realize that out of all the black UFC fighters that have became champions and have all been booed and hated, the one that they hate the most is coincidentally the most dominant, the youngest, sponsored by Nike. You know what I'm saying? Only 25 years old, and it looks like there's nobody in his way to stopping him. And coincidentally, he's the one that's hated the most. And it has absolutely nothing to do with race. Right. You feel me? So go ahead and send your messages, do as you please. But I will tell you guys, as long as you don't get on come to my video being, directly offensive, and trying to play the race card by sending racial slurs and all that kind of stuff, I got no problem. We can disagree, but just don't go too far with it, because I will block your ass and you'll never, send a message to me again. Okay? So that's really all I got to say on this, y'all. I'm on to the next one.